2020 hindsight is kind of a powerful thing, isn't it? I think if I had 2020 hindsight and went back in time to about 6 months ago, I would have been a little more careful with my YouTube postings. I won't say my YouTube output because I love recording this stuff and I love being able to edit it, but I was really excited and I was posting 2 or sometimes even 3 videos a week. And what I should have done is maybe done 1 a week, and that would have gotten me over this burgeoning excess of work that I've had the last 5 or 6 months, and I would have had scheduled YouTube releases. But I was so excited about what I was doing and I wanted you to be able to hear it. So I was basically sending stuff out as soon as I finished editing it. And now I know, because live as a composer is pretty much impossible to schedule. You never really know when you're going to be working or when someone's going to say, well, we need another week before that's going to be ready. And this is all kind of wrapped up into the deep thought of the day. As a composer, I started working in film and TV back in Los Angeles. I was out there for a number of years. I moved back to North Carolina, where I am now and where I am from, and I did corporate video for about 5 years. And then I sort of fell into video games, and it kind of like ticked the box for me. So I went after games like full-time, and that was in 2003, I think. So it's been, 15 or 16 years now. So here's the trick with games. I love working with the people. I love working on the projects. I love the freedom that game music gives you. The only thing I don't like about games are the schedules. Now, what I do like about the schedule is a lot of times you have long-term schedules, like long-term milestones. You can do 20 or 30 minutes of music and it's due in, a month and a half or 2 or 3 months. And you know that if you're doing even a large score that's 2 or 3 hours long, you've got 18 months to complete it. So a lot of it is just timing out your workflow with the game as it comes online, and you're kind of working parallel with each other. The problem is most games, in my experience, don't stick to their first schedule. Meaning if they say, hey, let's start working on a game and we're gonna go live, the second quarter of 2018. That'll probably get pushed to the third quarter at some point in time, and then maybe even the fourth quarter. And there's a pretty good chance it'll actually end up coming out in 2019. Now this means the game's going to be better and everyone gets to work on it a little more, and that's all super great. I have no problems with that. But as composers, we're at the end of the chain, sort of hanging on wherever it swings. And when things get delayed by 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, that means our schedule does the same thing. So I have a point here, trust me. 2011, I believe, when the PS3 and the Xbox, whatever it was, were announced, anyone who wasn't working on a launch title for those particular platforms, pretty much all those games that I was working on were put on hold. So I got a call or an email within about 5 days of the, I believe it was 13 different projects at the time, saying that they were on temporary hold. It would be 3 to 6 months before they picked back up, maybe even 9 months, because everyone's attention had shifted to the launch titles. Now there were 2 games I was working on at the time that were supposed to be launch titles, and they ended up not. So I had all of those games put on hold. It ended up being about 9 months. So I went from working more than full-time within a 5-day period, having no work to do for 9 months. And trying to be a smart composer, which I know are kind of the opposite adjectives that composers usually end up being called, especially when it comes to finances. I had money saved, but I just sat there and watched my bank account go down over 9 months because I was making literally 0 money. And I thought, I need to do something else besides games. So if this happens again in the future, and it had never really happened before, but if it happens in the future, I have like a buffer. I have something else that I can do. And of course, I didn't do anything about it because I'm not a smart composer. So fast forward to 2015, and the same kind of thing happened. I had the 2 or 3 main games that I was working on, all just had schedule slides. And a lot of times, the same way I'll have milestones for 2 or 3 big projects all line up at the same time, because these things are cyclical and they're seasonal, and a lot of times developers are looking to marketing to figure out when the games are going to be released, and everything works backwards from there. So they'll decide it needs to be released a little bit later because another competing game maybe is going to come out that time. Things shift. All 3 games, no work for like 6 months. And I thought, okay, this is like the second time this has happened. Not as bad as 9 months, and I had some other games to work on, but I really do need to start figuring out some other kinds of income to generate. Was I a smart composer? No, I didn't do anything about it. So now fast forward to about a year and a half, 2 years ago. I had one super big game I was working on, biggest game I'd ever done. I had an employee who was working with me full-time. I was going to be doing the Wise implementation of the game. It was going to be like 2 or 3 hours of music, all fully implemented, and then online stuff after that, just a really, really, really big job. And it was going to be almost my full-time gig for like 18 months. You know, bought a desk and a computer and a music station and everything for Thomas, the guy that was going to help me with the implementation, and got everything downstairs, and even for the first time said no to a couple of projects that just, I was afraid I wouldn't have enough time to dedicate to them because this was going to be such a big job. An online game came in that was only like 10 or 15 minutes of music every 2 or 3 months, so I agreed to that. And then I also had another big sequel to something that was with a team I'd worked with before, and I was being brought on as the composer by default for that, like a very, very big AAA game. So all of this was going on at the same time, and this was also when I was moving from my old house to my new house. And within the span of about 3 weeks, the first big game I was working on got completely canceled by the studio. The second online game I was working on got canceled by the developer, and the third game that I was supposed to start working on, basically they kind of cleaned house. The audio director left, a new audio director came in, and they did their own thing with music, which didn't involve me because I was attached with the first audio director. So for the third time in, what, like 6 years, I found myself with no work. And on top of that, I had turned down games because I didn't think I was going to have time to work on them, because it's just, unless there's someone else lurking in the shadows, it's just me here. I'm just doing this all by myself. So I was in a pickle. This time I went almost 15 months with no work because all 3 of those big things had gotten canceled, and I had turned down the other things. So starting 2 years ago, I decided to become a smart composer. I encourage you to do the same thing. Now, I think maybe for me, it was a little more natural because I've been doing music for 25 years or something like that. And I have inroads and I have connections that I was able to sort of use to facilitate some extra work. I understand if you're starting out and you're just trying to get work from anything, it's sort of like, well, that's great. What am I supposed to do? But hopefully, if I explain how I made it happen, it'll seep in somewhere in your life too. You too can be a smart composer. So I really wanted to do something that was not beholden to the video game schedule. And there was one game that I ended up working on that's coming out this year that also got pushed back like 6 or 8 months, I believe. So it kind of was still like a feather in my cap. I was still going to be working on the game, but it was also on hold. So it turns out that there's an engineer, Satoshi, who's absolutely incredible. He does all the stuff that I work on with Heaviosity. He started with Novo Strings, I think. He's done everything else since then. Satoshi does other things, and there was a library music company that needed help for a last-minute thing. They were doing some recordings at Abbey Road, and they just had a couple of slots in the recording schedule to fill up. And Satoshi was doing the engineering. He recommended to the producer of the library that they contact me. It needed to be done quickly, and it was kind of drum and synth-based. So I ended up doing 3 or I think 4 tracks for that. And I thought, okay, cool, well now I know this guy and we can kind of do some other things, so I have some things to kind of fill time if I have holes that open up in the video game production schedule. I also had a TV show that sort of landed in my lap by way of my agent, who's amazing, and this is what agents are really good for. She had another composer, Daniel Wohl, who's working on this new show called Project Blue Book that is out now, I believe, and it was just a very condensed amount of time, and he was looking for some help, which is the way pretty much all TV shows work these days, because there's so much music to write in such a short span of time So Daniel and I and one other person worked on this show. It was 10 episodes. So I found myself working on that, which was great. And I said to her, if you have anything else like this, I would be totally up for it. And in the meantime, I also was just kind of contacted out of the blue by someone in London at Universal about a library release they were doing that was basically based on Far Cry Primal. And he said, you know, this is kind of a shot in the dark, but this whole idea is kind of based on your score. Is there any way you could generate some tracks like that? So I did 2 albums last year, 2 library music albums, as well as a couple of pitches and some other smaller releases, like individual tracks on libraries. And I did that TV show, plus another composer needed some help on a new primetime TV show, and he has some other shows as well. So essentially, I went from all that work getting canceled and, you know, making sure the studio worked and doing all my kind of busy stuff, which is why I had the chance to start my YouTube channel, to within the span of about 2 weeks, the game kicked back up, the Project Blue Book show was going, and then what I was supposed to be doing for this other composer in a month ended up happening in a week instead, and I had so much work, again, that I didn't even know what to do. So just after the announcement of the Moss remix idea, all of these things came together at the same time, and it literally was me having to get up in the morning at like 5 and work on one TV show until maybe 9, and then work on another TV show until maybe 1, and then work on some library stuff in the afternoon, and then do that same TV show again in the evening. And I was doing like 18, 20-hour days, 7 days a week until like Christmas. It was really, really, really crazy, which is why you haven't seen me on social media that much, and I've been incredibly neglectful for YouTube. And like I said at the beginning, if I had paced my output of posting these videos to YouTube, you probably wouldn't have even been in the know that like something was going on. But now I do know. And TV season is almost over. It's like maybe 6 more weeks for these last remaining 2 shows. The game I worked on is completely finished, and I have some other things that I'm working on now, but they are nowhere near as demanding. Anyone who knows me from interviews and things, I'm very much a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday guy. So it's really hard for me to maintain kind of physical stamina and mental stamina and positive energy if I'm working 60 or 70 or 80 hours a week, but that's the way TV is. So I've learned so much over the last 4 or 5 months, but I'm also basically every single day thinking, oh, I really need to get back to YouTube. I really need to work on getting some more stuff out. That's just the reality of smart composers, and I'm glad that it happened. In retrospect, I still would have done all of those things. I just wish I could have paced the YouTube output a little bit better. So what does all of this mean? It means that I'm going to be starting up again with videos, hopefully kind of picking up where I left off. And I'm also going to be talking more about TV music and trailer and library music, maybe pulling up some cues and showing how they work and showing sort of the differences in production styles and needs for TV versus games versus trailers. And as a result of all this very, very intense work, I've completely reworked my template and gotten everything a lot more streamlined and kind of easier just to put my hands on things. And I'll talk about that as well. So that's me. I'm still alive, and things are more or less the same around here. All the animals are great. I did get a nice break at Christmas. Had to kick in a couple of days before New Year's and start working again, but it's totally fine. You're never going to hear me complain about having work, that's for sure. So I hope everyone's doing great in this brand new 2019. I can't believe it's already February, and I'm going to wrap it up, so you know what that means.